Hello and welcome to podcast number 2 from the Self-Publishing Formula.
Two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome. Yes, how brilliant to have you here. We're getting really into the swing of things with the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. We hope it's turning out to be what you want it to be, what we want it to be, Mark, which is something that's going to be giving them the direction that they need to get revenue in for their books, yeah?
Yeah, exactly, and I'm really excited about this episode today. We've got Pat Flynn on. So Pat, for those who don't know, is the guy behind Smart Passive Income, which is one of the podcasts and, in fact, one of the media empires that I subscribe to outside of the self-publishing space. And I haven't heard Pat on a podcast like this before, talking specifically to authors and imparting a lot of the good stuff that we hope to hear from the results of his latest book launch, which hit the New York Times bestseller list. So hopefully very interesting, James.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of you will know who Pat Flynn is. If you don't, you really do need to know who he is in terms of going into this space, because he's somebody who, just through the way that he works and what he's done in the past, kind of owns it. And he's a really, really good person to be close to and to hear and to feed off, and that's how he operates as well. Look, let's not talk anymore because it's a great interview. Let's go over to Pat Flynn. When it comes to online businesses, Pat Flynn is a name that stands above others. After being laid off from his 9-to-5 in architecture in 2008, Pat built an internet business, the Smart Passive Income blog, that today brings him a 6-figure income every month. Yeah, you heard that right, every month. How do I know that for sure? Well, that's one of the things that sets Pat apart from the others. His transparency and openness. He writes about, talks about, and publishes about pretty much every aspect of his business. And he's always on the search for inspiration from others, one of the things I hugely admire him for. We are both big fans of yours, Pat, so thank you very much indeed for coming onto our podcast today, all the way from San Diego.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited to talk to all the authors out there and do what I can to help out.
That's great. Well, everyone's a lot of people are very familiar with you, but not everyone for certain. And I want to take you back to the beginning just to set the scene a little bit and ask you a question that obviously not a great experience being laid off. When you started this business, when you had the genesis of the idea, is what you've ended up with what you set out to achieve?
No, definitely not. I don't think that's ever the case. When I got laid off in 2008, I wanted to get back into architecture. I loved my job. I wanted to do that for the rest of my life, but this was back in the recession in the US, and so there was nobody that was hiring anybody in the architecture field because nobody had any money to build any buildings. So I got really lucky that I found this podcast actually that was talking about online business, and there was an episode where there was a guy talking about how he had helped people pass an exam and was making 6 figures a year doing that. And his exam that he was helping people with was called the project management exam. And that was kind of my aha moment, my light bulb moment, because I had passed a really difficult exam in the architecture industry that I had some knowledge about, that I then decided to really package and turn into a website that then had study guides and practice exams that people could purchase. And it did really, really well. And after a year, it made a little over $200,000 and really saved my life, really, when I think about it. But now that I look back on that dreadful day of June 17th, 2008, when I got laid off, it was really the best thing that could ever happen to me. It really opened up my eyes to all these opportunities. And more importantly, it helped me just realize that I had nothing else to lose and take the required action to do what I needed to do online. I know for a fact that if I didn't get let go, I would probably still be doing architecture. I'd probably want to do something different, but I just wouldn't have the guts to, or I would be too scared to do it because, I had this other thing that was going. So I was very fortunate that I got laid off. And now, since building Smart Passive Income, to share how I built that architecture business and several other businesses that have come out since then, I've gotten put into this place where I'm sort of seen as the leader in this transparency, authenticity movement in the online business space, which was definitely not planned. I didn't think that would happen, but now that I've come to be here, I definitely am trying to own that and be a good example for people, because my first thought of online business when I first got into it was, like red flags, snake oil salesman, like that sort of thing. And then here I was getting into it, teaching stuff in a way that was helping everybody. Everybody was happy, and I was getting paid. I knew that there was a right way to do it, and that's why I started smartpassiveincome.com, and it's grown since then into a podcast, a blog, a speaking career, and now a best-selling book. So I'm super stoked about the whole journey. That's for sure.
Yeah, the fact that you had to be laid off to find that motivation, I suppose. I mean, you said, as you said, you perhaps wouldn't have done it without it. How do you advise other people then who are in comfortable livings, paying their mortgage, to make that jump without perhaps being laid off, without having that sort of moment?
Yeah, you don't have to quit your job, and you don't have to really just go in the deep end necessarily. The thing that I realized is that I just didn't know what was possible. I didn't know what the options were, and I got a lot of inspiration finally from other people who had become successful, which is why I'm really encouraged that you have this podcast, because you're featuring great advice and great people here who can then inspire those who are in that situation to take that action that is required. And if you really want it bad enough, it will happen, and you just will put in the required work to do that. For me, when I got let go, that was my way of saying, okay, I have to make this work. And there are other means of doing that. And of course, it's just really, how bad do you want it? So that's what I would advise.
Yeah, when I started, I was a lawyer originally. I don't know if I've told you that before, Pat, but for 10 years. When my second novel came out, it was kind of a expose of what it's like to be a lawyer in London, and it's been subsequently described as the longest resignation letter in London legal history.
I love it.
I got pretty much got. It was a parting of the ways, mutual parting of the ways that came up after that. I think I decided I wasn't ready. I didn't want to keep doing it, and my employers at the time realized that my heart wasn't in it. Mm-hmm. And I think in my heart, I knew what I was doing. I knew that I was going to get myself into trouble, and I actually wanted to be given the push because I wasn't quite ready to kind of forego the monthly paycheck. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just need to external events are the kind of push that you need sometimes. And it sounds like that was pretty much what happened with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You hear about a lot of the success stories and get into their background. There's always some, not necessarily dramatic event, but something that just triggered that thought of going in a different direction. Sometimes it's a layoff, sometimes it's a passing of somebody in a family, sometimes it's another event. But there always seems to be a moment, and I think that's really important to understand.
Yeah, so I suppose we have to find our moments, we have to find our motivation. But one of the great things about your SPI blog is it really sets out not just some of the nuts and bolts about the business. I mean, it's very incredibly useful stuff in there, but I think a lot of it is about the lifestyle approach as well. And I think we've talked about this on this podcast before, that what I sell to people when I'm talking to people about what I do is quite kind of an evangelistic view of how you live your life. And for me, the 9 to 5, it just does not belong to me anymore. I don't want to be part of it anymore. I don't think I could ever work in a 9 to 5 environment. And I think the way that we live our lives is much closer to people than they think it is. I think it feels miles away for most of my friends. They look at me like some sort of witchcraft goes on, but it really isn't actually, is it?
No, I mean, it's just certain actions that you take that help you build the lifestyle that you want. And it doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure. It's definitely not easy, but it does come with a mindset shift, and then the shift in actions that you take because of that new mindset. It is totally more possible now than ever to have that kind of lifestyle. And by that, I mean, you're doing work still, obviously. You're not just sitting back. And I'm never like on the beach sipping pina coladas all day. I mean, I work hard, but I work around the life that I want. And for me specifically, that's very much in tune with being here with my family. My wife and I, we drop our kids off to school every single morning. We pick them up both together every day. That's very important to me. I go to my daughter's dance class, and that's like at the top of my priority list. So I have a business that allows me to have a flexible schedule that allows me to do all that. And that's just one example of how I've been able to build a business in a way that is shaped around the lifestyle I want, and not the vice versa, which is what most people are doing, which is they work and then they try to fit life into that or on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're an author now. You're an author in many senses on the blog, but you're actually an author because you decided to write a book, and because you're Pat Flynn, once you decided to write a book, there it was in the top in the bestseller list fairly quickly. Let's talk about your approach to that. First of all, why did you want to write Let It Fly?
I wanted to write Will It Fly because it was very important to me to create something that would actually help a lot of people. I mean, any kind of content I create, I want it to be helpful, of course, but I knew for a fact that this would do really well, not just because it's me. I don't think that qualifies as anything doing really well until I think part of that is I do what I know is going to be helpful. And this topic of business idea validation, that is when you come up with an idea, knowing for sure if it's going to work once you do the work, that's validation. It's an important topic, and I'm not the first one to write about it. I'm not the first one to talk about it, but I'm definitely the first one to really just write an entire book about it. And it was so important for me to do this, and I knew this was the right topic because in several occasions leading up to the decision to write about this topic, by far, this was the number one question that my particular audience had. And I confirmed that through surveys. I confirmed that through direct one-on-one conversations with my audience. And I confirmed that also through a way that I collect voicemail questions from my audience too, for the purposes of actually taking those voicemails and putting them into a podcast. I have another podcast beyond the Smart Passive Income podcast called Ask Pat, where I answer a voicemail question 5 days a week. And the cool byproduct of that is I get my audience asking me questions every day, literally dozens of questions every week come in. And by far the number one question is, how do I know if this thing I'm working on is going to work? And when you think of somebody who's in a 9-to-5 position, for example, there's only so many hours of the day left. You know, there's the 8 hours or 9 hours of work, plus the time that you want to spend with family. And then anytime you need to take care of yourself in the gym and eat. And, you know, where is the rest of the time to do business? It might only be an hour. So a lot of people want to make sure that hour is well spent on something that's actually going to work. And because of that, they actually don't do any work because they're not sure if it's going to work out or not. So that was the genesis for this idea in this book.
So I find that really interesting. I mean, we get questions quite a lot of the time from non-fiction authors who are asking, I think I want to do something with a specialism that I have, but how do I know that there's a market out there for the particular book that I want to write? So, I mean, you went through that in a very systematic fashion. I think I listened to one of is it Ryan? I'm going to forget the name now. Is it Ryan Levesque?
Yeah, Ryan Levesque. It's not spelled like it sounds, but Ryan Levesque, who wrote the book Ask, and that book's all about surveying your audience, whether you have an audience already, a following, or even if you don't. There's ways to go about finding information about your audience, and in that way, you're not guessing anymore. I mean, the worst thing you can do is just guess, and then, of course, once it's out there, you just hope, right? And then if it doesn't work, you're left wondering why it didn't work. The cool thing about validation and going directly to your audience first is that you're not guessing anymore. You know. And when you know, you have motivation. When you have the motivation, you're going to do the work, and you're going to get that work in their hands much sooner, and you're going to serve more people too. With authors specifically, there's some really interesting things that you can do with validation. I mean, Jay Abraham, who's a famous marketer, he back in the day, this is pre-internet days, he would use validation strategies to determine what books he should write. I don't know if you know about this, but he would actually come up with a whole list of ideas of books to write. And the way he would test them is he would actually buy classified ads in the newspaper, one for each of those books, and collect orders for them. And he would see which ones would actually collect the most orders. And that's how he knew which one he should write first. And everybody else, he would just refund that money. And so that was kind of primitive ways of determining what to write about. But it makes sense, right? Because he has some proof. He has validation. There's numbers behind the fact that people want this book. So then, of course, he's very motivated to go through that rather quickly from there. I know a number of authors who are utilizing more modern strategies to validate the ideas for their book by just writing a little bit about it and making it something that they can give away for free, or something that's very cheap, just one maybe section of an entire book, for example, just to see what people think about it, to see what the reaction is like, to see if it's even anything you should expand on into a full-size book. Michael Hyatt, actually, his book that just came out called Living Forward was actually a free guide that was a lead magnet. And a lead magnet is something that you give away in exchange for a person's email address. And over 200,000 people, I think he had said, had downloaded the free copy of Living Forward back when it was just a lead magnet. And of course, since then, he's expanded up much on it. But back then, it was just a dozen-page PDF that helped people, and people loved it. So then he knew that was an idea that people wanted more on, and he turned that into a book that's now, we don't know how it's done on the bestseller list, but it's gone up to top 5 overall of all books on Amazon at some point. Even during the pre-order process. So those are just some cool ways that you could validate a book topic, actually.
So, I mean, in practical terms, I know that we'll get this question if we don't ask it. How did you practically go about surveying your audience? Was it something like a SurveyMonkey survey or something along those lines?
Correct. SurveyMonkey to my entire audience. And I didn't ask them would you buy a book on this? I asked them, what are you struggling with most? And then from there, I would then break them down into, well, how long have you had your business? Do you even have a business? How much money are you making if you want to share that? And by then I could really determine, and the cool thing about SurveyMonkey is I can pull out all the people who have yet to start a business, for example, and just look at their answers, and their struggles are going to be a little bit different than somebody who's had a business for 5 years, for example. And then I can really pinpoint that one big audience is who has the most request for help and serve them through this book. And that's it. That's exactly what I did. And so that was that was really cool. Another thing that I did, on top of the survey, on top of discussions, on top of just hearing a bunch of questions about this, I actually had, because I wanted to actually practice what I preach in this book in terms of getting people to pay for stuff beforehand, I actually set out to see if I could get 10 people to pay for the book even before I started writing it. And I did get 10 people to actually pay for it. $10. They just sent me $10 via PayPal, and I knew that was confirmation that, yes, this is okay. I at least have 10 customers now. Let's move forward with it. And of course, that in my mind, that's super motivational to have somebody on there that believes in you, who knows that this is a topic that they want to see a book about. And, of course, you're just fired up from there. Is
it funny how consumer habits, we get used to different things? A few years ago, that would have sounded slightly crazy, but because of crowdfunding and so on, a lot of us were paying for stuff we don't see for months. I mean, I bought a head-up display for my car, I think 18 months ago in a crowdfunding thing. At some point in my life, I'll get it. But, we change our habits.
I still have yet to receive stuff that I purchased on Kickstarter, actually, too. But then you also think about events, right? You pay money up front for an event that you obviously don't get access to until it actually happens. So it's not something that's outlandish, but you're right. Back in the day, maybe 2-3 years ago, it would be kind of like, really? Like, you're asking me to pay for it? It doesn't exist yet? But now it's like, oh yeah, like, I want to pay you for this idea. And the cool thing about this is the people who, not everybody who you ask is going to say yes. I mean, there's just people who won't part with money until that thing exists. But there's a certain set of people, early adopters, and that's what you're kind of looking for here. And the beauty of working with early adopters is that they're going to be there during the process that you create this thing as a resource for you to make it exactly what it needs to be, instead of just you have customers, then you build it and then you share it with them. You're actually working with them along the way. That's how you can engage them. And of course, once you come out with this thing, it's perfect for them, which means it's great for everybody else out there once you go full scale. And then you'll already have testimonials, you'll already have reviews, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and that's something that I do. Obviously, I'm writing fiction, you're writing nonfiction, but having a launch team, and before that, having beta readers was one of the big accelerators that I found over the last couple of years. So, I mean, just one thing, I was going to ask you that question a bit later on, but I think since you brought it up, we let's deal with it now. In terms of practically how you interacted with those that advanced team or those beta readers, what were you doing, and what were you showing them, and how did you take their advice into account?
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of fun working with the launch team. So the first thing is we announced to everybody that we were building this launch team. That, of course, creates buzz, makes people aware that this thing is coming out. And, of course, you want to collect applications. And the applications for those, I mean, I could accept everybody, but we did applications because it made people feel like it was more of a professional process, that this was like a serious thing. And we also wanted to see who was actually into it. We've received some applications where it was obvious that, like, they didn't care. They just wanted to get the manuscript for free. And of course, we didn't let those people in. So once you get this group together, we then manage them on a Facebook group, a private Facebook group. And that was fun because not only was I interacting with them, and I had actually a manager to help manage the launch team too in the meantime, but they were also able to interact with each other. And the cool thing about Facebook is everybody's there. Most people are there already, and you could share things and you'll get immediate feedback on those things. So some of the things we shared were timeline, just to give people that expectation of when things were going to happen. Then we also shared the progress of the cover. That was a lot of fun and actually an interesting process, because the interesting thing about a cover or design in any way is you're not going to be able to please everybody. And so there was a definite division in the group, which was great. It made it exciting. And then when the book finally came out, I mean, people were very interested in it, of course. Then we also actually shared, I didn't have the complete manuscript done by the time the launch team was created, but I did share the intro at first, and that was kind of the first part. And then later, once the manuscript was done, I sent an early first draft told them, hey guys, we hadn't gone through copy editing yet, but I wanted to give this early to you to make you feel like you're part of the process. Don't worry about spelling or grammar. That's all being taken care of. I just want you to read the story and let me know what you think. We did some other things where we asked them for their favorite quotes that we then used for social media purposes, which was a lot of fun. And of course, I shared some videos along the way too. I shared all the way through the setup process into CreateSpace and then Amazon, and just really sharing all those small wins along the way, getting everybody excited. And then on launch day, it was all about sharing. It was all about leaving feedback and reviews, and just making people feel excited and loved for being a part of this. I mean, they get the manuscript early and they get to see the behind the scenes, but I also get the interesting thing was I got some sales from people in the launch group. They got the book already. And I would say, I don't know the exact number, I wish I did, but I would guess 75 to 80% of that group, which was about 500 people, bought the book anyway, because they just loved seeing the behind the scenes and felt like they owed it to me, which was really cool. So that helped obviously with numbers and rankings and whatnot. But beyond that, it was just a great experience to have people and very motivating to have them in my corner when I launched.
Yeah, and that's something that I do too. So I mean, I'm always completely knocked for six when people, after helping me with beta reading and fact checking and all that kind of stuff, then are prepared to buy the book as well. It's kind of, okay, you've already more than met your side of the deal, and now you're going to buy the book too. And if enough of them, as you say, if enough of them buy the book, it doesn't need a great deal to give you a really good kick in terms of Amazon's algorithms, and start to launch with a high rank, and then the reviews and all that kind of good stuff starts to factor in together. Before you know it, I remember I was watching the launch quite carefully, and you started ranking very highly very quickly, even before you went wide to your full list.
Yeah, it was. I launched first to, like, when the book finally was out and available, I shared it in two places: the launch group and just my Twitter page or Twitter account, and that's it. And by then, it was already close to, I want to say, top 100 at that point, which was amazing, And then once I sent out the email, which came later than I wanted it to, because the Kindle version took a little bit longer to be approved than I was told it would be, even though it was within their quote 72 hours approval. It was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. It was more than 24 hours. So it was kind of, I kept checking and refreshing because I didn't want to send an email out where it was just the paperback and the Kindle wasn't there yet, because I can't determine what a person's preferences for how they want to consume content. But also, when the Kindle finally was available, what a relief, but the two pages weren't connected yet. So there were two separate Amazon pages, one for the Kindle page, one for the paperback. And I'm like, can anything else go wrong here? Because I'm waiting to send this email. And then finally, when they got connected, I had the email already written. I just hit send broadcast, and then everything just exploded from there. I mean, it climbed all the way to top 22 of all books on Amazon, which is incredible, and to see the graphs on KDP and the numbers in CreateSpace it was just awesome. And then the cool part was, a few days later, when everybody finally got their paperbacks that they ordered, I started seeing Instagram photos and tweets and all these things where people were like, I got it, and people were doing unboxing videos, and I mean, it was an awesome experience. And then I had my very first experience at a recent conference where people had the book. Actually, the conference owner bought 200 copies. That was another part of the marketing process. Was in lieu of speaking fees, I actually had conference directors purchase books instead. And this person gave away 200 books to the VIPs in this audience. And after I spoke, all 200 people lined up to get it signed. And that was a trip. That was incredible.
A nice nod to a paperback rather than a Kindle as well. Sometimes it's still worth having the older print. Get it signed. By the way, Pat. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was going to say, one person did have me sign their Kindle.
Oh man, no.
Yeah.
You should get them to do an indemnity form before you do that. Thanks for ignoring the fact that I called it "Let It Fly" earlier.
That's my fault.
Oh, no, it's okay. That's mixed up with my first book, Let Go.
Okay, yeah.
And then because Frozen came out, there's that song Let It Go. Some people call that book Let It Go, and Will It Fly? It's a little confusing.
Well, I was thinking Let It Fly is a pretty good name for the sequel to Will It Fly.
Yeah, Will It Fly? And Let It Fly. Don't stop yourself from actually having it continued.
That's a free
this is good.
as an SPF exclusive. As an ebook.
I should just reiterate again that all this stuff, 'cause that's the great thing about Pat, everything is laid bare on the website. I recall, Pat, I think there's a blog from one of your team, Known, is it? I remember, I can't quite pronounce
Known is his name.
He does the social media strategy, which I think you published last month, and it's really interesting to read the nuts and bolts of it. And that's how you operate, this kind of nuts and bolts guy, aren't you? This is how I did it. This is how it's going to work, and there's a few failures in there as well.
Oh, a lot. I mean, that's what people love hearing about the most. And I think, again, you had mentioned earlier that I do a lot of things that stand out in this space, and I think that's one of them. I'm more than happy to share my failures, because whether it's a win or fail, it's always a lesson for somebody. And if I could take a failure for somebody so that they don't have to do it, I mean, it just increases my brain and makes me happy, to know that I did that. I mean, in the book, I talk about this failure that cost me $15,000 because I was rushing into developing software that I didn't even know what I was doing. And that was a very expensive lesson, but I think I've saved a lot of people money by doing that. And of course, when you help people, they're going to want to help you back. And so it always comes back in return in one way or another. So whenever those failures happen, I'm more than happy to share it.
Yeah.
I say, talking about software, you had one failure, but you had one great success with the Smart Player, and that's what we're using on our website for this podcast, which is a really cool piece of software that we're very impressed with.
Thank you. Yeah, that was definitely a slower approach, and I definitely validated that product before actually building it this time, and it's doing really well. So I appreciate you guys using that.
I want to talk about one or two other bits of machinery and software beneath the surface that you use, and obviously a mailing list is massively important to you, and we're big advocates of it as well for authors right from the beginning. And I've noticed that your mailing list is quite sophisticated. Just talk to us a little bit about how the email stream to an individual member of your list starts to diverge and specialize for them.
Yeah, this is really cool. I've been doing this over the last 6 months, and it's had a dramatic effect on everything from open rates. I'm now seeing open rates between 50 and 70%, and click-through rates of 15 to 20%, which is huge in this space. And that's an email list of over 150,000 people. And so for the longest time, I just had one email list, like one giant bucket with everybody in it, right? And I would just send them all the same emails, both broadcast emails and autoresponder follow-up emails. They'd all get the same set of emails, which it worked fine, and it did okay. But recently, I got in line with a new email service provider called ConvertKit. And what I love about ConvertKit, I love them so much that I'm now on the advisory board for the company. But what's cool is they make it really easy to do some of the stuff that some of the more sophisticated email service providers can do, like Infusionsoft or Entreport, which are very sophisticated, but also very confusing. I mean, there's a reason why some people call it Confusionsoft instead of Infusionsoft. But ConvertKit was made by a guy named Nathan Barry, who's also an author. He's written a lot of books, but he self-publishes them, and he sells them directly from his own website. So he has quite a large audience, and he's a designer. And so he built ConvertKit as an email service provider to really just handle the intuitiveness of what it should be. And here's what happens when people subscribe to my list. So depending on where they subscribe on, I mean, different things happen. But let's say they just subscribe to the main list. When they get on the main list, one of their first emails, if they get that lead magnet or whatever it is that they subscribe to or for, after that, they get a follow-up email that says basically, hey, I want to give you emails that matter to you. And I realize that there's a number of different kinds of people in the audience who have different needs. So in order for me to do that, however, I need to know a little bit more about you, and I want you to answer just this one single question for me. And then it has a question with 3 answers. And that question is, which of the following best describes your online business or your business? The first choice is I don't have an online business, or I don't have a business. Second one is I have a business, but I'm struggling to break $500 a month. And the third one is I'm making over $500 a month in my business. So immediately, once they click on those, it tags them as such in ConvertKit and puts them into a whole brand new different set of follow-up emails specifically for that group of people. Because when you think about it, for example, somebody who's just starting out with building an online business, they're not going to need the advanced SEO strategies for how to rank on top of Google because they don't even have a website yet, right? So I don't need to send them that and confuse them. And most people who see that, they're going to feel like, for beginners, they're going to feel like it's completely overwhelming, that they're in way over their heads, that there's too much to think about. So I want to do them a favor and not even let them see that yet. But a beginner would need, well, here's the first steps, here's the mindset stuff, here's the first tools, the resources that you need. And so based on the actions that they take in these emails, and later I'm actually doing this on the website too, based on different things they click on, articles they read, downloads they download, I'll be able to better understand more about them so I could serve them content that makes more sense.
So, I mean, one of the things that's very apparent in your income reports is that you I think your biggest affiliate income is from Bluehost. Is that right? Yeah,
Bluehost is a hosting provider, and they've definitely got to that top spot for me in terms of affiliate income.
And would one of the reasons for that be because, well, perhaps recently you've been able to serve that's particularly relevant content to people who are looking to build a website early on, so they tick that first "I don't have a business yet" box.
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, that's one of the first steps, and I know exactly where those people are who need that first step, and I can just send them direct messages that are trying to cover a whole wide range of people. I know exactly who they are, where they're at, and what they need, and I can give that to them. There's some other cool things in the emails that I'm doing. I'm using that in conjunction with Optimizely, which is a cool site. Optimizely is primarily known for allowing you to create A/B tests on your website, meaning you can send half your traffic to one version of a page and half to another. And if there's just one variant, you can just see which one actually works better. That's called A/B testing, which is really smart. And everybody should be testing. But they also have this thing called personalization. So I can, through a special cookie, if people are on a particular email list, for example, they will then be served different resources when they go to my resource page on my website. So the people who are in the advanced part of the list, for example, when they go to my website and they go to the resource page, they don't see Bluehost because they don't need Bluehost. They don't have to build a website from scratch again. They see the more advanced courses, the growth stuff, the virtual team building and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it can get very sophisticated, and it's definitely very confusing at first, but for me, I had to take it one step at a time and just break down that audience and then see how I could best serve them from there.
Yeah, because we still use MailChimp for the kind of nonfiction side of the business. We use MailChimp, and I think we're pretty much pushing up against the limits of what that can do. I mean, right. I love MailChimp. It's been great for us, for me, for 5 years, and for what we do at SPF for a couple of years. But when you start to get into tagging and stuff like that, it does get a little bit limited. So we've been looking at Infusionsoft, and I've been daunted by just the complexity of it. And I had been looking at ConvertKit, so that's really helpful for us actually. Just
cool.
With that.
If you need any more help with it, let me know.
Thank you very much.
So talking about revenue streams, Pat, I'm interested about the book. Is the book a revenue stream in itself for you in the future, or is it a lead magnet to encourage other things, such as the public speaking? I know it's quite a big thing for you now.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lead magnet primarily. However, it does come with a byproduct of a little bit of income on top of that too. So far in the month of February, I calculated, that was launch month, I calculated that it had generated about $45,000 in sales, in revenue, which is in profit, actually, excuse me, which is great. That's not including the expenses, however, to pay for like my coach, my editorial team and stuff like so. True profit would be about $20,000 from there, which is still great. I mean, it's still great, especially for a book and a self-published author. Obviously, I do come with a large audience, so that does help. But this was primarily made for lead generation. But more than that, I mean, lead generation is kind of a I kind of just sigh sometimes with that particular term because it doesn't treat those people like people. It's treating them like a number or a lead, and I'd much rather see it as a way for me to start a long-term relationship with somebody. That's really what this book is all about for me, because I'm playing the long-term game. I mean, this book is going to lead to potentially more books, of course. Not potentially, it will, and then definitely lead to courses and things that come down the road afterwards. So the book, if I wanted the topic of the book to really make money primarily for me, like right off the bat, it wouldn't have been a book. It would have been a course, and it would be very easy for me to sell that, and I could charge a lot higher for it. However, I knew that I wanted to create as much exposure for me as possible. If I did it as a course, it would be sold to primarily my own audience already, and anybody I reach out to via Facebook ads, for example. But with the book, I know that I can utilize Amazon's algorithms and reach a lot more people than I would have before, and also the notoriety that can come with something like the bestseller list or just getting at the top of some of the categories in Amazon, that there's a lot that comes with that too. And again, like I said, this is a long-term play for me. So these future books that come down the road, they're going to have the success of Will It Fly behind it. And I think that's going to help push everything else forward from this point on.
Yeah. One thing that you were particularly clever about, I thought, was, and this is really relevant to anyone who's considering nonfiction right now, is that it's more than just a book, isn't it? It's like a mini course, really, and there's AV elements, there's videos and bonus content that I think you can access only if you do actually sign to your list. Is that right?
That's actually not true. You could, for example, and this was kind of part of the strategy, was at the beginning of the book where people can still see it in the preview in Kindle. It actually has copy for getting access to the course. Now, the course is free. And so the idea they're putting it in early is that some people will probably go and try to get it for free, but the course is doing its job in terms of A, collecting emails, B, allowing me to build a relationship with people. And I have an affiliate link on inside the course to keep track of how many people go into the course first and then actually buy the book. And it's actually converting. So there are actually people who are getting access to the course and then buying the book, which is kind of interesting. But this course, I got inspired to make it, instead of just a random bonus book or a bonus starter guide or some giveaway, because I wanted to, like you said, there's some multimedia that I felt would have added to the book a little bit. There's some parts where I talk about how to set up spreadsheets in Google, and I figured that would be best to do via video. So I have that mentioned in the book, and there are many moments in the book where I say, go to willitflybook.com/course. So you could all go there right now, actually, if you wanted to. But you can see how that works. And I got inspiration for this actually through one of my favorite TV shows. It's called Walking Dead. On AMC. I don't know if you've heard of that show.
Oh yeah.
But it's a great show. My wife and I are obsessed with it. But at the right before every episode, you hear the voiceover guy say, go to walkingdeadstorysync.com to get your behind the scenes about this episode. And actually, while you're watching the episode on TV on your computer, if you go to that website, you actually see some stuff related to the scenes that are being shown and stuff. It's really cool. And I figured, I was like, maybe there's a way I could do this with my book. So I actually have this course. Again, it's completely free. Again, it's meant to collect email addresses. And it's laid out chapter by chapter, exactly like the book. And within each of those chapters, there's videos, if there are any videos in that particular chapter that would be helpful. There's also worksheets, bonus downloads, and my favorite part, the links that are mentioned in the book. They're all clickable right there. So it's very easy. And that was one of my pet peeves from when I had read books and saw a bunch of links. It's just like, I felt like it was hard for me to keep track of them. So that's all there. It's a big value add. But here's the thing. Currently, there are, I would say, close to 17,000 people who purchased the book, both Kindle and paperback. The course has 5,000 people in it now. So it's converting like 30% or something like that, which is it's great. I mean, that's now I have 5,000 emails of people who have read or are reading or are about to read Will It Fly? And I could directly contact them. And here's a moment where it has already paid off. So my coach and I were talking the other day. His name's Azul. He was helping me with accountability with this book. He saw that I had like 170 reviews after a couple weeks. And he's like, this is great. This is great. But I think you can get to 300 by the end of the month. And I had only a week left. And I was like, well, it took 3 weeks to get to 170, 1 week to get to 300. This is kind of insane, Azul. Like, I don't know how. He's like, you have emails in your course, right? And he's like, yeah. Or I was like, yeah. And he's just like, send an email to them and say, hey guys, I'm looking for reviews. So I did that. Within 24 hours, I gained another 100 reviews. Yeah. And it blew my mind. And of course, because they were all in the course and because they were all getting a lot of value out of it, most of those reviews, I would say 98% of them were all 5-star reviews, which was mind blowing. So I did actually get to 300 2 days before March 1st, which was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this is real kind of outside the box thinking, and you know, it works perfectly for nonfiction. It's absolutely ideal for that, but it could work also for fiction. So I mean, a lot of our listeners will be fiction writers. And one thing you could do if you're writing fiction is to say have like the Walking Dead example, you could have notes from the author, so like an author note at the end, which instead of being written to be read, could be a video. You could say, you know, for backstory on how I wrote this book, then visit this link. Yep. At which point you collect the email address, and then you can do all those cool things that you did. So getting reviews, or you know that these people have bought from you before, which is very valuable information. So I mean, you really you push the envelope a lot on
thank you. So I've always had the dream of writing a fiction book. I don't know if you knew that, Mark, but no, I want to, like, really bad one day. Just It would be awesome. So here's what I would do to take this example that I shared in the nonfiction world of this course, chapter by chapter. This is what I would do if I was doing fiction. I would write this amazing book, right? And then, of course, I'd have this. It wouldn't be called a course. It would be called something else. I don't know what it would be called off the top of my head. But in each chapter, I would have artwork that shares some of the scenes that I envisioned. Maybe I work with an artist to create what these worlds that I envision, so other people can be in that world too. I would create areas, and I have this in my course too, where in a couple of the chapters, I actually ask people to answer a question, and there's a commenting system there. And now they're all talking with each other. They're answering my questions, and so I would have a couple parts in that, whatever we call it, bonus thing, where people can add, hey, what would you do in this situation? Would you do what Joey did, or are you on team Joey or are you on team Sarah? Or just really start to create this community within your book too. And that would be really fun. And of course, the more you can get your audience involved and make them feel like you're allowing them to be a part of it, I mean, you're set for life, right? In the series of books that you come out with after that.
Yeah, and not many people are doing that. I only know of one other fiction author who's done anything like this, and I'm going to have to put his name in the show notes because I can't remember off the top of my head. But he writes sci-fi, kind of space opera, and the thing that he does is he built this website which all links into the book, and which describes his ships. So he's got these massive ships, and it's like, okay, this scene is set in the bridge, so there's a clickable link that would take readers to on their tablets, for example, they'll go to the bridge and see like a plan diagram of what it looks like. And
so cool.
He spent like 20 grand on this. It was a huge amount of money, but it's so cool. I was very, very, I don't write that kind of fiction myself, but if I did, I'd be all over that. It's just really, really clever. Oh
yeah. And then, by the time I come out with mine, virtual reality will probably be big in every house.
Please wear your headset now.
Yeah, right. Come read my book, put on your headset.
Yeah. Pat, let's talk about audience engagement a bit, because obviously it's important to you. And I hear what you say just now. You're using terms like lead magnet and lead generation, but and I think it's probably a good way to think about it properly as a relationship, but you do kind of have to find each other. Now, it's only going to work if they really like the stuff that you're doing, and this works for authors writing their fiction or yourself with your model. If they like what you're doing and it's of value to them, then that's great, but you do have to find each other, right? So we call it lead generation or whatever at the beginning, but that relationship that you then work with people, as your list gets bigger and bigger, what are you, 150 or 1,000 now, I think you said?
Yep.
How do you do that? How do you keep that personal? I mean, do you work how many hours a day? Do you reply to all the emails you get from everybody on your list? I mean, can you still do that?
No, I can't. I mean, it's just impossible. I wouldn't be able to do anything else if I reply to every single email, which is sad because when I first got started, I would reply to every single email and I would reply to every single comment. And when you start out and you have that capacity, I would absolutely recommend doing that because there's no better way to really start that relationship than that small interaction. So at the start, that's what you have to do. But later on, you have to implement some strategies. For example, I do a lot of interaction on live streaming platforms like Periscope. And there's ways for me to be personable and show behind the scenes and share more than just what you would get on my content normally through these social media platforms in a one-to-many fashion. So I think that's really important to understand that that's how you can scale this relationship building. And that's the cool thing about podcasting also. I feel podcasts are an amazing way for people to listen to you as if you were in the same room with them. And as a producer, I'm just talking to a microphone, but at the same time, I'm speaking to 80,000 people every time I hit publish on my episode. And they're feeling like I'm just right in their living room or in their car with them or on a ride or walking their dog with them or wherever. So that's how you can sort of scale these relationship building things over time. But as far as finding each other, I'm going to take a note from Mark Zuckerberg over at Facebook. And he said that there's no better recommendation than one that comes from a trusted friend. So with whatever audience you have, no matter what size it is, there's always an opportunity with the people that you have to reach more people through them. And starting those relationships and making them feel great is what's going to make people want to share you to everybody else. Because when I mean, think about it, you share stuff that's awesome, right? And if you're the first to find something that's awesome, you share it because you want to get credit for it. I mean, that's why we share, or one of the many reasons why we share. So if you provided this amazing experience, if you share something that's amazing with somebody, they're likely going to share. they're more likely going to share if you actually give them permission to do it or ask them to do it. And sometimes, when you have that relationship already, a lot of people don't ask and they feel afraid to. But if you provided value, you have the right to ask for them to do stuff for you. I think a lot of people, especially in sales, are afraid to do that. People who are trying to start a business, they're afraid to ask for money. You can't be afraid to ask for money. You should be afraid to ask for money if you don't have something worthy of asking money for. But if you have something that is going to be helpful or entertaining or obviously worth their time and money, then it's your job. It's your duty to do that, because if you didn't, you'd potentially be letting them down and not getting in on that experience.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right when you say that in the early days you should respond to as many emails as you can. That's
your advantage.
Exactly.
That's somebody's advantage over me. I can't do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't take too many of those to build up those 1,000 true fans. That's the kind of magic number most people say these days to sustain a creative business.
Yep.
But the trick is, it's not a trick. It's just this is something that you do extraordinarily well, Pat. Probably I can't think of anyone who comes across in podcasting as approachable and as likable as you. And that's by being that kind of friend who you haven't met yet, if you like, that it does kind of create the relationship with your listeners or your readers that makes it more likely that they're going to tell their friends. You'll start seeing those tags in Facebook posts saying you've got to listen to this podcast or read this book or this blog. And that to me that's the secret these days of making money from digital products. It's kind of taking it back to almost hand selling things and being someone who's approachable and you can ask questions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I know that when I go to conferences, for example, people come up to me who I've never ever met before, and they start talking to me like we've been friends forever because they've heard my voice over and over again, or they've read my book, or they hear me, they know me, and they know me because I'm open about a lot of those things, and I'm just not afraid to be me. I think that's the number one advantage that we all have is that we're ourselves. Nobody is like us, but a lot of us are too afraid to be us sometimes on these platforms. And I think another part of it for me specifically is I'm definitely open to being vulnerable, and again, like sharing these failures. I think that makes it more human. And in this online world, the more human you can be, the more likely it is somebody's going to be attracted to you. And as my good friend Chris Ducker says, like if you're you, it's gonna really work because your vibe attracts your tribe. That's what he says. Your vibe attracts your tribe, and I love that.
Yeah,
I hadn't heard that before. That's good.
You can feel it working with you as well, didn't you? Pat, we're hitting the 45-minute mark for the interview, and I know your daughter's going to be waking up soon, so but I do want to get a couple of extra bits in quickly, and I promise we're going to let you go soon.
Thanks.
So we talked about podcasting a bit, and I love your enthusiasm for it. I come from a background of radio and television, and I know from my time in radio, I have such a fondness for it. It's the most personal of mediums, and I used to do a radio show on here in the UK, and I always used to do Christmas Day breakfast, and on Christmas Day breakfast I would speak to the same people every year, and they would say, you're the only person I'll speak to today, and you were their friend. They were elderly by themselves or whatever, and it was a beautiful medium. And podcasting is such a liberation for me that's come along, because particularly, it sounds weird, but with so many people listening on headphones, it becomes an even more intimate experience, that you're speaking to people, and that's why people feel they know you, and I feel I know you, almost just from this chat here, but people listen to you every week, as we do. So yeah, your enthusiasm for that's good. But I do want to ask you a question about podcasting as well. And I'm afraid I'm going to use the old tacky term lead generation, going back a little bit as well. But we've kind of caveated why we say that. But so we're just getting into podcasting. And, it was really hot 2 or 3 years ago, and you've been a master of it. What's your advice to us? And do you think it's still in the same position that it was a couple of years ago?
I think it's even hotter now, to be honest, because now it's going mainstream. Now podcasting applications are on your phone and you can't delete it because Apple put it there because they know how popular podcasts are. Now podcast applications are being built into cars' dashboards. So people are going to be listening to podcasts just with a click of a couple buttons while they're driving already. So in terms of lead generation and building an audience in that way, because more and more people are listening now, you definitely have a great opportunity. More new listeners are coming every day, and you want to be the show that they find and really get connected with and listen to on a regular basis. But at the same time, of course, there's more podcasters who are coming into the game and actually, trying to get involved too, and trying to build their lists and trying to get in front of an audience. And because of that, there's more competition. But like with anything, the cream will rise to the top. And I think it's really important for you to be smart with your approach with your podcast and really target the right people. And also proactively go out there and promote your show. You can't just expect the way it has changed a little bit from back when I first started. Was that you could back in the day just put up a show, and because there was fewer podcasts, it would get exposure in new and noteworthy, which you could still do, but it hasn't had the same effect. So the new and noteworthy part of iTunes is a part that you automatically get on if you have good artwork and the sound quality is good, and that gives you some free exposure to everybody, really, especially in the categories that you put yourself into. But now it's just there's a lot more podcasts coming, so you get lost in those there really quickly. So you're going to have to use, tactics and strategies to really get in front of the people that you want to get in front of. And that's, there's a number of different ways to do that. It's through connecting with other podcasters and doing kind of a share for share type thing. Here's a great tip. You can interview forum or group owners. And when you do that, they feel special because they're on the show, but what are they going to do after that show's over? They're going to share it with their entire forum because it makes them look good. And then you have this whole new set of listeners. And so there's some strategies. If you just are smart about it, you can think of how to grow your podcast and continue to do that even today with so many podcasters out there. But there are many more podcast listeners than ever. And because of that, I definitely still think it's hot and still think it's the wild, wild west. And it's a great opportunity for people.
Good. Well, that sounds encouraging. Mark, take all that on board. And my final question, really, for me, thinking about the way that you operate and the stuff that I like about the way you operate, is the content that you produce is really good quality. And, funnily enough, that's not always the case, even with some really great people in the same space as you and us who are doing really well. But the kind of sound quality in the podcast is not good. The video quality is really rough. But that you've set quite high standards. Where does that come from? What's your background? And, where's the drive for that, or how have you made it happen?
That's an interesting question. I think there's a couple of reasons why that's my approach. I always want to be at the top of whatever I do, and I do that, and I know that some of these things will give me the advantage, and that's really important. Part of it's also because the way I grew up. I mean, I was the kid who would come home with a 95% on a test, and I'd be asked where the next 5% was, and also part of it's because I was just in architecture, and in architecture, you can't just put half energy into a building, because people's lives are at stake, right? You have to really do it right. And that's how I approach my business, because if you don't do it right, a building could crumble and fall on somebody, or it could just not behave the way it's supposed to, or, all those sorts of things. So my architecture background, and plus that's obviously design, so design's important to me too. I think that all plays a role in why I do what I do now. And that's not to say that you have to be perfect, though. I mean, it's definitely not perfect. And it's definitely progressed over time. I mean, if you go to some of my earlier podcast episodes, yes, the sound quality was okay, but just the way that I spoke lacked confidence. I didn't even know what I was doing. Looking at my earlier YouTube videos, it's very apparent that I didn't know what I was doing, and that the visuals and the design wasn't there. And, you just learn over time as you do. And that's been my number one educator, is execution. And so I execute as much as I can, because I know I'll learn the most that way.
Yeah, just to tie that back, as we let you go, Pat, to the book, the launch videos that you shot with, I think, is it Caleb?
Caleb, my videographer.
I mean, they are extraordinary. I don't know if you've seen those, James, but if you haven't, we'll put them in. We'll put them in the show notes.
We will.
They were a lot of fun.
With your son was just beautiful. Really clever and personal, which is kind of, I think that probably sums up SPI and what you've been doing pretty well, about as well as I'll be able to manage at 20 to 11 on a Tuesday night. So
thank you, Mark.
That's so. Just, I mean, it's pretty obvious where people can find you. But is it any particular links you would recommend people visit to get to know you?
Yeah, you had said 2211. I had to think about that because I'm West Coast, so I'm like trying to do the conversion or something. But anyway, thank you so much for having me on, guys, and I appreciate it. To all the other authors out there, best of luck. I hope this has been helpful to you. You can find the book at willitflybook.com, and that's really where to go. Or you can find me at smartpassiveincome.com and at Pat Flynn on most social media platforms.
That's great, Pat. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to the sequel, Let It Fly, when that comes out. I feel a little proud. Yeah. We'll speak again, I'm sure. Thank you so much for joining us, Pat.
Thanks for having me, guys. Bye.
Well, there's no doubt, is there, Mark, that he is an accomplished broadcaster as well as accomplished at being an internet entrepreneur, for want of a better word.
Well, that's praise coming from you, James, and yeah, he is. He's completely super professional and one of the nicest guys I've spoken to that I met online. He's just such a nice guy, so easy to like, and that's one of the reasons why he's just doing so well with everything that he touches right now.
Yeah, and what I really liked about it, and we picked up on it a few times in the interview, is this idea that you're not a snake oil salesman. I mean, there are lots and lots of people and organisations on the internet that are more or less that. They're shallow. That he advocates having something of value that's going to work for the person that has joined you, and that's the only way that you can operate. And that's absolutely something that I know that you've been really strong about right from the beginning of this SPF project. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've done has been of value and is completely free for people because you want to help them, and of course there's a business behind it as well, but it's got to be substantial.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about for me. And when it comes to some of the things that we're doing with the income reports, that is, I'm not ashamed to say, that's inspired directly by what Pat's been doing for several years now. So transparency is important, integrity, and helping people, and that really shone through with the interview with Pat.
Okay. Great. Well, don't forget, as Mark mentioned, the income reports are available. They're alongside the podcast. You should get them as part of your subscription. There'll be another one coming along shortly. We also have coming up shortly an interview with Marie Force, who's a fantastic author and somebody else who kind of owns our space more than anything else. She's really shown a way, particularly a way of engaging with readers and how using how when you get that relationship right with your readers, that's such a great benefit to everyone involved. That's a good interview as well, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, really, really worth waiting for that one coming soon.
Okay, we look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you so much for joining us on the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
And don't forget, you can win a great prize by helping spread the word about this podcast. Visit selfpublishingformula.com/contest to enter. The prize on offer is Mark Dawson's acclaimed paid premium course, Facebook Advertising for Authors. A course which isn't available to anyone at the moment, by the way. It also includes Twitter advertising for authors, with further modules to come, including YouTube ads for authors. And you can give yourself more than one chance to win. Just pop along to our dedicated page at selfpublishingformula.com/contest.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.